Okay, this is the fifth and really final video to overview the course content. And this one we'll be talking about, not that book, this book. A Private Sphere, Democracy in a Digital Age. You can tell I've been doing a lot of these kind of at once, starting to get tongue-tied here. But we'll look at this book to get a little bit of a specific look at the way that new media and digital media is influencing political processes, democracy, participation and citizenship, things like that. We'll cover chapters 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of the book. And even though we'll cover it in 2 weeks, I'll go ahead and kind of discuss the overview of the course content in this one video. It may run a little bit longer for that reason. Week 6 is typically reserved for course wrap-up, projects, presentations, things like that. Chapter 1 begins with a discussion of how we tend to react to new technologies with either utopian or dystopian narratives. Utopian, the idea that some technological advancement is going to make everything perfect. Dystopian narratives, the idea that it's going to be the end and the ruination of all mankind. The Terminator film series, for example, is a dystopian narrative of technology. And we tend to react to new technology in one of those two extreme ways in our everyday lives. And in fact, the advent of online education has often, I shouldn't say often, but at times has been met by dystopian style of fears by educators. And there are some who also think it could be a game changer in a utopian way. What the book kind of lets us understand is that really, when we think about technology in those kind of blame or praise ways, that's a way we have of relieving ourselves of responsibility. The case can be made, though, that it's not about technology, but rather what we do with it. And then the book also sort of looks at whether or not the notion of a democracy and how we enact one, whether that needs to be rebooted in a new digital media age. Indeed, I think that, one, and this is also, comes out of our discussions earlier about things like fair use and copyright law and things like that. One issue with new media is that it doesn't conform to old paradigms. Does that mean you throw out the paradigm? Does that mean you throw out the new form of technology because it doesn't fit? I don't know. That's for you to decide what you think on that. But the point is, we often analyze new things according to criteria, new technologies, we often analyze them according to criteria that don't match up for evaluation. It'd be like if I gave you an essay test and tried to, grade it like a math test. It just wouldn't match. So rethinking some expectations is probably valuable in analyzing new forms of technology. So chapter 1 kind of looks at that idea and expands upon it. Chapter 3 looks at some ideas, some attributes generally associated with emerging forms of media: interactivity, anonymity, convergence, hyperreality, community, and identity. They'll again get developed more in the notes and in other content that you'll have as the throughout this term. Of course, these are buzzwords. Sometimes we don't know what they mean. We just say them and think that we do. Convergence in particular is addressed in the book, both as a shift in media consumption and media production. This leads to a shift where boundaries between audiences and creators often get blurred, and we get new terms like prosumer or producer, portmanteaus of different words. The book talks about those. We're talking, it's some of the same ideas from the participatory culture stuff in the YouTube book, how consumers and audiences can become creators in producing. The book talks about textual poaching, describing the consumer's way of seizing control of and reappropriating manufactured content. And again, that's in line with ideas related to clipping on YouTube. And this is a big issue. On the one hand, freedom of expression becomes more easily accessible. On the other hand, there are legal and copyright issues. Fair use laws have tried to offer a useful point for thinking through these tensions. and then we'll talk in the class about whether or not copyright and intellectual property laws need to be re-examined again. Do those laws match up with new technologies sufficiently to be applicable? And so that's an idea teased out in the book. But again, this book addresses an idea that we touched on before in some of the other videos here. Historically, there's been a division based in access to technology and expertise associated with that. But that's changed in a variety of ways, and you'll get some videos that look at that and develop it more. And so that's what Chapter 3 kind of outlines. Chapter 4 looks at citizenship in a converged environment. It outlines 5 types of citizenship. 2 in particular, monitorial citizenship and digital citizenship, are applicable to this class. They are types of citizenship often enacted via digital technology, and basically it comes down to monitorial citizenship is kind of standing back and looking at what's going on and trying to use technology to learn about it, kind of take the pulse of the world, whereas digital citizenship is, civic responsibility enabled by digital technologies. This type of citizenship would most likely engage in both commentary on culture and participation in culture. Alternative media forms and various types of content creation rooted in that prosumer ideology would be used in this form of citizenship. And so so if you have a blog that posts a link to a news story, and then you offer some commentary on it about whether the media covered it right or not, or what you think about the story. That's digital citizenship. You're not just aggregating content. You're also responding to it and commenting on, and therefore trying to maybe affect some change is too strong of a word, but just to kind of have a voice in what we think about it. So, and I've already can think of a few examples that I'll probably point you to, when we're actually covering this during the course, but I'll save those in the interest of time here. The last 2 chapters in the book, chapters 5 and 6. Chapter 5 looks at the democratizing potential of new technologies. And it talks about the breakdown of the traditional model of the public sphere versus what the book terms the private sphere. The public sphere traditionally was somewhat separate from a private sphere. In the era of traditional media, it sort of took root in things like television, radio, things like that. And the book talks about some various problems with television coverage of politics. Television and other sources tend to reduce politics, democracy, and deliberation to aggregating public opinion, yes-no polling, approve, disapprove, these binary simplifications that don't encourage you to make your own meaning, make your own statement, just kind of select from a pre-chosen menu given to you by a polling organization or Fox News or CNN or whatever. And so politics becomes more polarized in that environment. Also, the news media tends to politicize issues rather than encourage genuine debate on them. And the news media focuses on the process of politics, that game aspect of it. And that can reduce our confidence that we have control over it or that it exists to serve our best interest. Then the chapter moves on to a discussion of whether new media forms correct these perceived problems or not. And then it outlines some concepts like access to information, commercialization, reciprocity. They'll all be discussed more in your notes that play into that. And the last chapter in the book, chapter 6, looks at the idea that some civic habits have emerged via new media and that contributes to the notion of the private sphere as now the ground for political discussion when maybe it didn't used to be. One that's talked about is the networked self and remote connectivity, the idea that we're always connected to the world that's going on. A phrase I heard is the news doesn't stop at 6 p.m. anymore, because you can tweet about it all night long or blog about it all night long. And so Civic obligations can also be performed alongside and in conjunction with other social or pastime activities. You might get on Facebook and make a silly comment about a friend's photo and then turn right around and post a link criticizing President Obama or Rand Paul or Mitch McConnell or whoever. The second concept there is blogging as a new narcissism, but the book tries to redeem the concept of narcissism and talks about narcissism being about introspection and self-awareness. And with respect to specifically political ideas, this self-directed expression can be motivated by a desire to connect with society, and it can again lead to more of a self-awareness, which oftentimes political discourse is not about self-awareness. I'll just leave it at that, because this is not a political science, political communication class, but blogging can be different. It also looked at satire and subversion, particularly in the case of YouTube. And one thing the book teases out that I think is a good idea about YouTube in particular is that its tendency to be postmodern, unorganized. It allows for an engagement with political and social issues in a way that is more in line with how we experience our life. We don't sit down from 6 until 7 when a news show is on to deal with issues of the economy or race relations, marriage equality, whatever political issue you're talking about. We do it in the process of living our lives, and traditional media forms ask us to demarcate attention to it. YouTube and other forms of new media let us engage it in whatever way we want, whenever we want. At 3 in the morning, being serious, funny, sad, politically incorrect, whatever. There's also social news aggregation, where you can, link, comment on, and order information in whatever way you see fit. You can start your own kind of mini news network. You choose what stories you want to link to and report on and comment on. And so that's social news aggregation, which is a different type of crafting content and engaging in it. And there's some other concepts that are talked about in the book, but I kind of want to leave it there because we're getting long on time there. But those are the ideas that are teased out in the last book that we'll cover in weeks 5 and 6. A Private Sphere. And that is the conclusion of our 5th and final overview video.